Randy Commissar. The book is set in February 1999 and it begins with a prologue. Our author, Randy, is motorcycling across Burma to a place called Bagan. Now, it's in the middle of nowhere, but he has a good reason for wanting to get there. And as he's making his trip, he comes across a makeshift taxi. It's essentially a rickety truck. And standing on the rear bumper of that truck is a young monk. And the young monk motions wordlessly that he'd like a lift. Eventually the truck stops, the monk jumps off, and they set off on their journey together to a place called Mount Papa. Now, if you've never heard of Mount Papa, there it is on screen. It is a Buddhist temple that erupts from an otherwise flat landscape. So after 100 or so kilometers, they get to their destination, this shabby temple that's actually popular with monkeys. When they arrive at their destination, an old monk in sun-faded robes emerges from the temple's entrance, and the monk and the older monk greet each other. The original monkey disappears quietly up the hill without any sort of even acknowledgement in the direction of Randy. And the older monk introduces himself as Mr. Wisdom. He says, "I am the abbot of Mount Papa Monastery." After some small talk, Randy makes the point that he says, I've travelled 150 kilometres with this monk on my motorcycle. I don't really know where I'm taking him. Is this where he wants to go? Mr. Wisdom replies, "Oh yes, this is where he wanted to get to." And they continue with the travellers' chit-chat, and Randy then asks and gets directions to Bagan. And he starts to make his way back to his motorcycle, and he finds the original monk waiting for him. And confused, he says to Mr. Wisdom, "I'm not sure what it is that he wants. This is, I thought, where he wanted to get to." And he says, "Yes, but now he wants to go back. Can you take him?" "But he just got here. I drove all afternoon," Randy says. "It's nearly sunset and he wants to go back. What's the point?" And bemused, Mr. Wisdom says, "I don't know what the point is. I cannot easily answer that question, but let me give you a riddle to solve." And he pauses and he smiles at the young monk. And he turns back to Randy and he says, "Don't try and answer this riddle straight away, but think about it. Imagine I have an egg and I want to drop this egg 3 feet without breaking it. How do I do it?" And the monk seems quite pleased with himself, and away he goes back into the temple at Mount Papa. And so begins our book, The Monk and the Riddle. And that riddle there is the riddle from the title. And although this book was originally written for entrepreneurs, there is an awful lot for us to learn as business people about how to create a life while making a living. What we really want to do with these lessons as we continue through this course is to understand what matters in a business. And that's not some sort of wishy-washy, let's all have a hug. It's about understanding the strategy behind how you can add value to a business. So our lesson 1 begins with chapter 1, and it's called the pitch. So each lesson in this course will follow one chapter from the book. So lesson 1 is called the pitch. And before we get into this lesson, let me explain something about how the book is set up. So the whole book is written as a back and forth, if you like, between Randy, who is a real person, and a composite of people that he calls Lenny. Now, Lenny is a composite, like I said, of lots of different people that Randy has met over the years, and they're all entrepreneurs who are pitching to Randy with a business idea. So, chapter 1 is the pitch. Now, Randy sees about 2 or 3 pitches per week, and he says, just like in Hollywood where everybody has a script, in Silicon Valley, everybody has a business plan. The very first meeting between Randy and Lenny takes place at a real coffee shop. It's called a conditori, and supposedly it's a comfy coffee shop with outside tables, and there it is there with the outside tables. It really is a real place in California. And we meet Lenny. And Lenny is described as essentially being full of coffee, and he's coiled up like a spring and he's ready to pounce. And Randy is concerned that maybe he's ready to pounce at him. And Lenny's opening line is that he wants to put the fun into funerals, which is quite the opening statement. He goes through his pitch with Randy and he says in year 1 we'll make $10 million, in year 2 we'll make $50 million, and in year 3 he says we're going to make $100 million. And here's where we want to pause right at the very beginning of this course and the very beginning of this lesson. We want to understand that this is how all businesses start. The company that you currently work for most likely began as one person's idea. Sure, there might have been 2 or 3, even 4 co-founders or more, But it probably began as one person's half hazy kind of idea for what the business should be. And the reason that's important to know that, the reason it's important to pause at that point and understand that, is because if you know where a business began, then you can start to see its trajectory. You can start to see where it's headed. And when you understand where the business is headed, you can start to understand where you can add value. So this is where all businesses begin, by hustling, by talking to anyone who will listen, by telling everyone that this business is going to change countless lives. It's going to make an insane amount of money. And when you understand that, when you understand where a company begins or a business starts, you can start to understand its trajectory, its vector, if you like, for where it began, where it is now, and where it's headed to. So our first question to you is, do you know where your company began? Regardless of whether it's a 2-year-old company with 10 employees and a few sales under its belt, or whether it's 180 years old with 10,000 employees, do you know where it began? Do you know whose idea it was? Do you know why somebody decided to set it up in the first place? And what this does is it begins to give us an idea about the values of the business. So, getting back to the story, Lenny is halfway through his pitch. Randy is listening intently, and suddenly there's a phone call. A phone rings. And Randy thinks to himself, that's not my phone because I don't have one. And Lenny, mid-sentence, picks up his phone and answers it. And he takes the phone outside, and it seems from Randy overhearing that somebody has let Lenny down. Lenny is, no, please, just give me 2 more weeks. No, I'm with Randy right now, and he loves it. He loves the product. He loves what I'm talking about. And the whole time, Randy is sitting back in the conditori restaurant thinking, I never said I loved it. I'm not into this. And he thinks to himself, well, his rudeness for answering the phone is as good an excuse as any to leave. And he gets up to leave, and he has a second thought. He says, for as clueless as this guy is, he could do with somebody giving him a helping hand. And he sits back down, and he says to the waitress, Connie, he says, Connie, my friend out there, he'll have a decaf.